Check Podcasts. Hi, I'm Bruce Williams. I'm the CEO of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce, which is why we call this the Chamber Chats. I would like to begin by acknowledging that I live and work in the ancestral territories of the Lekwungen-speaking Coast Salish nations, the Songhees and the Esquimalt, and of course a privilege and honor to live and work alongside them every day. Chamber Chats are made possible by the support of Island Savings, a division of First West Credit Union. And we normally record this in the studios of Czech Television, but right now, at this time of recording, we're still dealing with the restrictions of the Omicron variant within the COVID pandemic. I want to talk today with a couple of people who represent organizations that represent a group of people who, in the plainest of language, have challenges at the best of times. But the incidences that have happened throughout the pandemic have further challenged people who live with disabilities. We're going to talk about that with a couple of different organizations. Wendy Cox, first of all, is the executive director of the Victoria Disability Resource Center, located a half a block from where I am on Fort Street. Hi, Wendy. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
And Joanne Neubauer is the board chair of the Action Committee of Persons with Disabilities. Joanne, welcome. How are you?
Thank you. I'm really good today.
Great. So thanks for being here, Joanne. I'm going to begin with you. Can you just kind of give us an overview of your organization and what you do?
Yes, we're called the Action Committee of People with Disabilities. Very significant because we're run by disabled people for people with disabilities. And we do a lot of various things. We provide individual advocacy for people who are struggling for services for persons with disability status, Canada Pension, people with disability status, and rental problems, employment problems, discrimination, human rights issues, and we provide individual support for that. We do a lot of community consultation, like these kinds of things, whenever possible. And we really faced the issue when the pandemic got started in deciding what we were going to do in terms of our office when most places were closing down. And we deemed ourselves an essential service because we recognized that libraries were shutting down, which was one of the sources for people with disabilities, and offices were closing where people couldn't go in, and a lot of people don't have phones, don't have a place to live, and we thought we need to keep our doors open if at all possible, and we did it thanks to our volunteers and committed people in the office.
Well, it's very important work that you do. I want to pick up on something you said about discrimination shortly, because that, to me, is one of the real tragedies of this whole thing. But Wendy Cox, neighbor, tell me about your organization. What does your center do?
So we stray sort of from the advocacy side. We don't have anybody trained here to do advocacy, but we work one-on-one mostly with individuals and help them apply for disability benefits, Canada Pension Plan, Registered Disability Savings Plan, Disability Tax Credit, all of those things. We also will provide resources for different areas. So a lot of people might come in for peer support. We can offer that, as well as refer to other organizations that might, provide a better service in terms of that. We've got some different programs as well, like the disability awareness training, the lived experience around disability. So it's just sort of going out in the community and creating awareness around what it's like to live with a disability and how to interact with persons with disabilities. So that's rather exciting. We do see about 10,000 people a year, and like
Wow.
most nonprofits, rely on funding grants and donations.
Yeah, as I say, you're just down the street from us, and I've had the opportunity to be in your facility, and I have seen the spectrum of people that you work with all the time, and it's quite eye-opening and quite remarkable. Joanne spoke a little bit about the things that her organization had to do to make the shift into COVID, and can you talk a little bit about that, and maybe even, Wendy, some specific examples of a particular challenge that someone had to manage?
Yeah, so we did close initially when things came down. I think March 17th, we closed our doors. Everybody stayed home for 2 weeks to isolate. And then slowly we came back into the office. But we did stay closed for a long time. And we were able to provide most of our services and programs remotely so that it worked out quite well. The one sort of barrier we did have was we issue the accessible parking placards for persons with disabilities. And we weren't able to do that in person for a while. So it created some challenges for people who might not have the technology to make payments online and whatnot. And that created a challenge as well. So like we did all of our Zoom groups and one-on-one meetings distantly by phone, email, and video conferencing. So there was a large portion of people that didn't have access to that or don't know how to use the technology to access services. So we tried to find a way around that. So we were able to meet outdoors distantly, one-on-one with some people as needed, but that created a challenge in the winter and the cold months. We were very grateful that ACPD and a couple of other organizations were able to remain open because we were able to refer people to their services.
And when we come back to your organization, Joanne, I just want to touch on what Wendy had said about funding and how you do the work that you do. How do you find the resources to do the work that you do?
We get a yearly grant from gaming funds, actually, and that incorporated with our volunteer contributions gives us some money towards our expenses, but not enough. And the only other money that we can access are grants. We were grateful to receive a grant from the City of Victoria. They had some grants around COVID issues, and the Victoria Foundation also gave us funding, which addressed some of the issues that Wendy was talking about, people who don't have computers and access or training on how to use it. Our organization ourselves, we didn't have the capacity to do Zoom meetings, for instance. We were meeting by telephone, which was really hard for a lot of our board members. And so the city grant gave us some funding to address that issue. And then the Victoria Foundation gave us some more funding. So we were able to set people up. Now we can meet via Zoom and hopefully connect a few other people in the community who are undergoing isolation issues.
I want to talk next about the particular disabilities and how people identify them and things that people who are listening and watching this right now may not know. I want to talk about that next. On the Chamber Chat today, we're speaking with Wendy Cox, who is the Executive Director of the Victoria Disability Resource Centre, and Joanne Neubauer is the Board Chair of the Action Committee of Persons with Disabilities. So, Wendy, you're my neighbor, and I see people who, like you, who use a wheelchair for your mobility. There are people who are vision impaired. Tell me a little bit about, though, of the spectrum of people that you serve. What are their disabilities?
So we are a cross disability organization. So anybody who identifies as having a barrier to the environment, to the community, is welcome to our services. But we also work with family members, caregivers, parents, friends, because sometimes they require services or they're asking on behalf of somebody with a disability. So yeah, I mean, we work a lot with. Yeah, the spectrum is so huge. So
Mm-hmm.
people with visual disabilities like mobility or like you said, somebody who might be blind or partially sighted, somebody who uses a walker, but we also work with people with invisible disabilities, which is it poses its own set of challenges. So especially around pain issues, because that can really affect every aspect of your life, your memory, your eating, your concentration, your and it's hard for people to understand it when they can't see it. Um, so yeah, and then there's a lot of people don't only present with one disability; it's multiple disabilities. But I do want to point out it's not so much the disability, it's the barriers in the environment and the barriers that are faced when out in the public and out in the community, and that's sort of where we base it on. So we don't require anybody to come in and tell us what their disability is or provide proof. We don't need a doctor's note. It's more about what are the barriers in the society that you need removed or need help overcoming.
That's kind of systemic stuff, really, isn't it? Just
Yes.
the way things have been done. Yeah, Joanne, I want to come back to you now and talk about that same thing. That the folks that you deal with, when we identify, is there a better word than disability? Should I be using another word? I seek
We're
your guidance on that.
constantly we're constantly searching for a better word, really.
Yeah,
We tossed back and forth in the original beginning, handicapped. We were called Handicapped Action
yeah, that's
Committee.
no good. No.
And it's okay in a way because handicap is like, if you think about the golf game, it's kind of, you
Oh,
start with certain assets, right? And then you go from there. But disability, some people say, well, the dis is so negative and we don't like that. So, and other than having like a really long name, it gets kind of cumbersome. So we try to use people
hmm.
with disabilities, people with a disabling condition, so that we put the people first. And that's what we try and do.
You mentioned the word discrimination before, Joanne. I want to frame a little. Joanne, you and I spoke yesterday, and you asked me why I'm doing this and why I have this interest in this. I'll briefly tell you why. When I was a fairly young man, when I worked in broadcasting, I was engaged to be a host at an Easter Seal telethon. And I knew very little about persons who identify with a disability. Easter Seals as kids. And I was a little bit scared. I was a little bit afraid of it. I didn't know what I didn't know. And I don't think that I was discriminatory, but I learned a whole lot in a big hurry. And that's why I've come to see that the focus is on the ability, not the disability.
Yes.
But Joanne, can you talk a little bit about discrimination and how that impacts people?
Yes, I can. It's a complex situation, though, because a lot of times people don't realize that it's happening. When you go to a store, for example, and you're with somebody, I'm in a wheelchair, and if I go to the store with somebody who isn't in a wheelchair, people will inevitably talk to the person not in the wheelchair, even though I'm the customer. So it
Yeah.
begins right there. And riding the bus, there's always some static around whether the person traveling with you is your attendant. And I've received a lot of static and discrimination actually from bus drivers who have said, your attendant has to strap you in then. And that didn't matter if I was going on a date or not. It was like right there in the beginning, welcome to my life.
Wow.
And hopefully you can stick by it. And so there's that. And then with employment, you can walk in, and if you have a visible disability, generally, you're going to face a barrier that nobody talks about. And even if they bring it up and you try and tell them that you're creative and that you can think of ways around a problem, it's often a reason why you can be turned down. Then if you have an invisible disability, you generally don't want to talk about it, but sometimes people kind of think maybe you're a little bit strange because of your unique ways of relating, and so that then it becomes challenging because the person could identify that they have a disability and make it a little bit easier for people to understand how to relate with them, communicate with them, and yet you don't want that to affect. Now they're going to treat you just a bit differently. We did commercials actually with CFAX Radio years ago. Um, Mel Gibson donated a lot of advertising time with us, and we tried to make sure that when we advertised people who were looking for work, that they saw the person and the credentials. And then we talked also about the disability because we feel like it's important to talk about it. And we don't want to discriminate on the basis of not talking about it. We want to educate people that even though we have these conditions, we have a multitude of ways of coping and creativity of dealing, and we have some loyalty for people who realize that we have a lot to contribute. So there's a number of really good reasons, to hire us, for example. So all the way through renting, when you go to rent, people want you to be on the first floor in case of a fire. People want to make sure that you're going to pay your rent, even though, you know you can afford it. So there's so many angles of discrimination that it becomes very challenging on a daily basis. And then you get the outright uh, discriminatory statements where, well, we're not going to hire you because, you're disabled. And that's been said. well, no, you can't rent here. I'm sorry. It wouldn't be appropriate here. And then we've had people go to rent the same apartment who weren't in a wheelchair, for example. They got the apartment. So it's been very interesting. Even the Department of Human Resources can discriminate against their own clientele, and they do. So
Wow.
yeah, we're important.
Yes, you are. That's why we're here to talk about this today.
Yes.
We want to bring this back to COVID next when we continue the conversation. I want to talk about the isolation factor. On our chamber chat today, we're speaking with a couple of representatives of organizations who represent persons with disabilities. Joanne Neubauer is the board chair of the Action Committee of Persons with Disabilities, and Wendy Cox is the executive director of the Victoria Disability Resource Center. So, Wendy, very often mobility can be a factor and isolates persons with disabilities at the best of times, and then COVID came along. That must have had a profound impact on the general mental health of the people that you work with.
Yeah, we saw a lot of that. We actually, shortly after COVID, started our peer outreach program where we were calling people to just to check in, make sure people were getting their needs met, and see if anybody had resources. And it turned out to be a lot bigger than we thought, which was wonderful. It was sad. So many people were isolated. We did find a lot of people were isolated pre-pandemic already. Not only maybe being stuck in their home or not having people come visit, but also a lack of care support and attendance support. We saw a lot of that. And I know there's a lot of amazing home support workers out there that did isolate from their families to give support to people that needed it. So yeah, that was wonderful. But yeah, the isolation was a big piece.
Yeah, for everybody, and I'm saying this is just compounded by the circumstance in which your clients and customers live with. I want to also, I don't want to get political here, but I'm kind of going to, because one of the things that happened immediately after the provincial budget came out was that a number of people said, "Well, there's not enough there to assist people with disabilities. There's not enough money to help everybody and do everything." But Joanne, what sorts of things could come forward from government that would be worthwhile support that might even save money for government in other areas?
Oh, could we have a 2-hour session on this? At least, I mean, um, it's kind of unbelievable the ways that things could be done differently. My shortest answer was to tell people if you could think of a way to say yes instead of no, that would shorten a lot of expenditure. Because in the end, the law will uphold what we're asking for, and you will end up saying yes. So you may as well just figure out how to say yes in the beginning if possible. And it's a much more positive way of approaching everything anyway. The long answer is, I just can't help but think about the people who are stranded in the residential care facilities and isolated from their loved ones. And I never understood that because there's gowns, there's masks, gloves, everybody can wear that. And there's no reason not to be able to go in and see your family member. And I couldn't believe that people were stopped from going in and doing that. And everybody was very courteous and stayed away. But it meant a lot of people died alone, and that was really, really hard to hear.
Yeah.
And we thought about people with caregivers. I myself ended up in a very precarious situation because I have a hard time getting caregivers, and I was getting people who were from out of country, and many of them went home before they were locked out of going home.
Oh, okay.
And so and then I couldn't get anybody here because everybody was staying home. And so there's another long story there that I'd love to be able to tell people about because it's very, very critical for a number of us who rely on caregivers in the community. So, the government could really, we're such an important part of community. We provide jobs to a lot of people. We provide an atmosphere. It takes everybody to build a community. Well, we're part of that community. And it's important the word inclusion is an easy one to say, but a hard one to do. And everybody thinks it has to cost a lot of money. And yes, sometimes it does. But in the end, it's worth it. And in the end, it's cheaper because once you have actually practicing inclusion it costs way less because more people can be involved and more people can help out.
Yeah, the word inclusion is actually part of a committee that we have here at this chamber, and Wendy serves on that committee. Actually, we have something called the IDEA Committee, which is the Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Advancement Committee. So we're going to advance all of those causes, and we of course are including Wendy to represent a number of the other organizations. In future chamber chats, we're going to talk with organizations that deal with specific matters like brain injury, like sight, hearing loss, and that sort of thing. Is there anything, we've only got about 30 seconds left. Wendy, is there anything going on anywhere else in the world that we could poach and we could use here that would make the circumstance better?
Oh, that's a huge question. I don't think I can answer that.
Well, we can carry it over into the next chat, but there are things happening being done better elsewhere, right?
I could say around housing, there are quite a few things that could be done here that could be more affordable, and I would love to talk about that as well.
Yeah, that's something we can do in a future chamber chat for sure. But housing is an issue for everyone, and it is certainly paramount and front and center with your organizations. How can we help you? Wendy, can we give you money? Can people donate to you?
Always. We will always take money. Yes. Actually, on Canada Helps, you can even, if you go through Canada Helps, people can choose which program they want the money to go towards. So it's kind of a nice option for people. It also has the option for monthly giving, which does it's a less of a financial burden for people to donate monthly, smaller portions, and it creates a little more longevity for the organization.
Great. And Joanne, we can give you money too, can't we?
Yes, we're registered with Canada Helps as well. We're a charitable nonprofit organization, so donations are really appreciated. Yes, please.
You're right. We have a whole lot more to talk about, and we will do that in future chamber chats. I want to thank you both very much for the high-level conversation we've had today to sort of indicate where we can all make a difference and make the world a better place for all of us. Wendy Cox is the Executive Director of the Victoria Disability Resource Centre, and Joanne Neubauer is the Board Chair of the Action Committee for Persons with Disabilities, both of them based here in Victoria. Thank you both for your time. We'll see you next time on another Chamber Chat.